They sold my house before I could speak again. The first breath I took without a tube in my throat tasted like lemon disinfectant. And then like theft. Sarasota Memorial's ICU hummed around me, and the ceiling sprinkler looked like an unblinking eye-keeping score. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. Elena, the night nurse with the soft step sneakers, leaned over the rail and said, "Your nephew kept asking where you keep the deed." My voice was a twig. My phone was dead. She set a small paper bag on the tray. My wallet, my brass house key, a dead HOA fob, and a gas station receipt time-stamped March 11th with my name, looped in a childish flourish I've never used. I'm a contractor. My signature is blocky and stubborn. That swirl on the A wasn't me. I croaked for water, and while the ice chips melted, Elena confessed she'd pressed record when my sister leaned close to my bed on March 8th and whispered, "He won't remember a thing." The ventilator was doing all my remembering that day. I was a man tied to machines, while someone else tied knots in my life. By dawn, I borrowed a charger, powered my phone, and dialed my own landline out of habit. A cheerful stranger answered in a recording, "Thank you for calling Bayline Holdings." I blinked at the ceiling again. Bayline? Like barnacles on a hull, pretty name for a parasite. I asked for the county recorder's office and gave my name, my parcel number, my careful contractor cadence. The clerk's fingers pattered across a keyboard and then halted. "There's a deed recorded March 12th, she said. "Seller acting by power of attorney. $2 million, my house." My breath grew tight, not from tubes this time, but from arithmetic. 40 years of labor, poured footer by footer, suddenly summarized in a line item I hadn't signed. I stared at the lemon-glossed floor and felt the old calculus that had saved me on job sites. Measure twice, cut once, rage later. That villa wasn't property. It was Miriam's laughter trapped in cedar and glass, the retirement we planned and never reached. After she died, I built that place with receipts I could recite by month, permits I could find in the dark. Every invoice was a stitch in my widowhood. And now a forged pen stroke had cut it loose. They wheeled me to step down the next morning. Elena pressed her phone into my hand. I listened to the audio, my sister's breath, the hiss of hospital air, her voice, sign for him. He'd want the money liquid. The word liquid hit me like cold water in the face. Liquid means gone. I made a list on the back of the March 11th receipt with a blunt pencil. Recorder, title, HOA, notary. I underlined the date twice and circled the amount, $28.13 for gas and a coffee. Then I wrote one word, Mason, the lawyer who'd once traded probate advice for a porch rebuild. I wasn't ready to dial him yet. I needed to see the wound with my own eyes. They discharged me on March 16th. Florida spring wrapped me in warm salt air that smelled friendlier than it felt. I clutched the key that might no longer fit and limped to the curb. The Uber dropped me at my own address. White stucco, teal trim, a dock like a finger pointing at the bay, and the smart lock denied my code with a polite red blink. Through the glass I saw a stranger's sofa and a stager's plant that didn't belong. On the quartz counter, under the hum of my pendant lights, sat a crumpled HOA special assessment for $2,800 like a note left by a thief who couldn't be bothered to tidy up. Pressed my palm to the glass and felt nothing from the home that used to warm my bones. I was back on the sidewalk in my own life, shut out by people who shared my blood and none of my backbone. I breathed in, steadying the hammer in my chest. Then I turned, took a photo through the pane for the date stamp, and walked away to begin measuring what they'd cut. I went home to a stranger's furniture and that $2,800 bill daring me to fight. My late wife's quilt stared back at me from a real estate listing. That was how I knew this wasn't some clerical mistake. It was a betrayal with a photographer. When the Uber rolled to a stop at my own driveway on March 16th, the place looked smaller, cheaper. The new for sale sign squeaked as it turned in the breeze. I punched the smart lock code, nothing but a red flash. The system I installed myself now blinked like a heartbeat that didn't recognize me. Through the front window I saw rented furniture, all beige and soulless. They'd staged my home like a stranger's Airbnb. On the quartz counter, under the pendants Miriam once picked out, lay that crumpled $2,800 HOA bill. A sugar packet from Seabird Cafe sat next to it, logo facing up. March 9th. Someone had been here sipping lattes while I was tied to machines. I pressed my hand to the window. The glass was cool, indifferent. I'd built those cedar beams by hand, sweating through a Gulf Coast July, promising Miriam that this would be our last move. When she passed, I turned the project into my therapy. Every nail was a prayer. Every receipt was proof I could still create something that stayed. Now it was gone, signed away by my own blood. Back at a roadside motel, I opened my laptop and searched the MLS. There it was, my villa. Sold off market, posted March 12th. Listing photos uploaded March 6th, while I was still fighting a ventilator. On slide 7, Miriam's teal quilt was neatly folded at the foot of our bed, sunlight on its hand-stitched edges. They hadn't even bothered to remove it before calling in a photographer. That quilt was the last thing she sewed before the chemo took her hands. I stared at the screen until the tears blurred the pixels. Rafi's name popped up under Agent Contact. My nephew, the kid I used to let mix concrete on my job sites just to make him feel useful. The kid who begged me to co-sign his first car, I called him. Straight to voicemail. "Hey, it's your uncle," I said, my voice shaking. "Call me back." Instead, I got a text from Natsia, my sister. "You need rest," she wrote. We handled things. Like I was a mess to mop up. That night I didn't sleep. The motel AC hummed. The mini-fridge clicked, and I stared at the ceiling fan like it was a pendulum counting down my dignity. I thought about Miriam's laughter echoing off unfinished drywall, about how she'd stand barefoot on the subfloor and say, "Promise me you'll live here," I had promised. By 3 a.m. I stopped crying and started counting. March 3rd, ICU admission. March 8th, POA date. March 11th, gas receipt. March 12th, deed recorded. Each number was a nail in the coffin of my trust. At dawn, I looked at the gas receipt Elena had tucked into the bag. Same handwriting as the signature on the listing documents, I was sure of it. I underlined the A in my fake name. It looped upward, youthful, almost cheerful. Rafi's handwriting always had that swing. He'd even once bragged that his loops looked professional. My jaw locked. Collapse was over. Now came calibration. I flipped open my old binder, the one labeled Estate and Legal Stuff. The first name inside was Mason Pike, Eskeen, the attorney who'd helped me with probate after Miriam's passing. I'd rebuilt his porch for free that same summer. He'd told me once, "You ever get in trouble with property, call me. Sarasota's full of sharks." I stared at his card for a long time, the embossed lettering catching the motel's dim light. Then I dialed. He picked up on the second ring. "Pike Law. It's me, Ray. Ray, how are you breathing, man? Heard you were in the hospital." "They sold my house," I said quietly. "While I was still in the ICU," there was a pause. "The kind of silence lawyers use to measure the size of the storm." "Who's they?" "My sister and her son. Used a forged power of attorney. I've got the receipt, a dead key fob, and a listing photo with my wife's quilt." Jesus. Papers shuffled on his end. "Don't touch anything. Don't go back there. Meet me tomorrow morning, 9 sharp. Bring the bill, the receipt, and anything that's in your name. Will it matter?" "It'll matter to me. And if it matters to me, it'll matter to a judge." I hung up and stared at my reflection in the motel TV. My eyes looked older than 62. My hands, scarred from decades of work, still trembled, but they were steady enough to hold a pencil. I wrote on the motel notepad, March 17th, Mason, 9 a.m. Bring evidence. No contact? Stay calm. The sky outside turned grey with the Florida drizzle. I walked to the window and pressed the gas receipt flat against the glass. The ink had started to fade, but the date still showed. Show 3/11/2025. My proof. My oxygen. That's when something strange happened. I stopped feeling like a victim. I felt like a builder again. The foundation was gone, sure, but the ground was still mine. When dawn crept in through the blinds, I packed the receipt, the HOA bill, and Miriam's photo into a folder. My throat was still raw, my breath still shallow, but I had purpose now. Dawn ticked forward like a starting gun. I buttoned my shirt, tucked the folder under my arm, and headed for Mason's office, carrying what little was left of my home in a brown envelope and the certainty that by the time I was done, they'd wish I'd never woken up. The forged power of attorney wasn't even warm yet when Mason slid the county records across his desk. His office smelled like salt air and oak polish. He had the kind of calm that comes from 40 years of seeing people lose everything and still walk out with their spine straight. The blinds were half open, letting thin stripes of Florida sunlight slice across stacks of manila folders. March 12th, he said, tapping the printout. That's when they recorded the deed. Power of attorney dated March 8th, notarized by someone named Kendra Lowe, Gulf Notary Mobile. He flipped the page toward me. That name mean anything? I shook my head. Never heard of her. He leaned back. You were intubated on March 8th, right? Elena texted me a picture of the ICU board. It says intubated until 3:15. Then we've got them, he said. We're filing for a temporary restraining order and a Ellis pendens. That'll cloud the title. No one can transfer or sell without the court's blessing. He scribbled a list. Here's what I need from you. ICU visitor log, HOA entry logs, that ring cam card you mentioned, and anything with your real signature from before the stroke. We'll compare the handwriting. I exhaled slowly. It felt like framing a wall. Measure twice, nail once. We mapped out the week, March 17th to 23. He'd handle filings. I'd hunt proof. That afternoon, I drove to the HOA office. The receptionist smelled like coffee and new toner. Behind her, a microwave beeped and an oven timer dinged in the break room. She looked bored until I showed her my old access card. Fob 311, she said, typing. Let me pull your log. The printer hummed. She handed me a warm page. I stared at the entries. March 7th, 10 and 12, times like 11:47 p.m., 2:15 a.m., 5:03 a.m. The same week I couldn't even swallow water. The air in my lungs turned heavy. Someone had been walking in and out of my house in the dead of night while I was tied to a machine. I folded the page and slipped it into my folder. Proof lived in small rectangles. Next stop was my own fridge. I remembered the magnet shaped like a dolphin holding a notary's business card. I'd left it there since a repair job last year. When I got back to the house, I found the door sealed with a new padlock. I didn't force it. Instead, I reached through the mail slot with a coat hanger until the magnet dropped to the floor. The card slid out beneath the door. Kendra Lowe, Mobile Notary Public. That was enough to tie the bow. Elena texted later, found it. Attached was a photo of the ICU whiteboard with the words, intubated until 3:15. Underneath, she'd written, I heard your sister again that night. Said you'd want the money liquid. That line stayed in my chest like a nail. Liquid. Like she was cashing out grief. By the time the sun set, I had the logs, the card, and the photo. Mason called just as I parked outside the motel. Filed the TRO and Ellis pendens. Hearing date April 5th. You're officially on the record now. Get some sleep. I didn't sleep. I called P.I. Torres, a man whose voice always sounded like gravel over whiskey. He'd been recommended by Mason. Kendra Lowe? He repeated. Drives a silver Hyundai Sonata. Florida plate QFL 37D. Usually parks at a cafe on Seabird Avenue. My pulse ticked faster. The sugar packet I'd found on my counter. Seabird Cafe, March 9th. Can you get eyes on her? I asked. He chuckled. Already sipping coffee. The next morning, he texted me a photo. Her car parked outside Seabird, time-stamped. Beneath it, he wrote, meet me here tomorrow 8 a.m. Bring your notebook. March 18th became a blur of photocopies and forms. Mason called again, voice steady as ever. We're making this clean, Ray, not loud. We're setting them up for a fall they can't blame on emotion. I nodded into the phone. Make it cleaner than their conscience. That night, I spread every piece of paper across the motel bed, the ICU board, the HOA log, the notary card, the receipt. My fingers traced the ink like blueprints. Each line told a story. When they entered, when they signed, when I stopped breathing and they started scheming, I whispered Miriam's name once, softly. You'd laugh at me now, huh? Building a case instead of a house, but she'd know. I wasn't chasing revenge. I was restoring a boundary. By midnight, Torres texted one final update. Your nephew just met with a buyer's agent at the sandbar. Cafe. He's grinning like a man who doesn't know the ground is about to crack. I looked at the folder on my desk. Proof stacked in layers, like the walls I once framed, and for the first time since waking up, I felt steady. This wasn't rage anymore. It was math. Paper doesn't lie. People do. The next morning, I packed the evidence into a weathered leather satchel. The sun hit the motel window, pale and sharp. My breath fogged the glass, and I traced one word with my finger. Justice. Then I erased it with my sleeve, stepped into the light, and headed to meet Torres, ready to put faces to the signatures that had tried to erase me. I held the notary's ink in my hand before I even realized how much it weighed. March 19th. Sarasota sky, pale and hard. The kind of morning that looks clean but tastes like rust. Torres and I sat across from each other at a corner table in Seabird Cafe, the same place my counter sugar packet had come from. He sipped his coffee without hurry, eyes locked on the door. I stirred mine, pretending calm. "She's here," he murmured. Kendra Lowe walked in, short, nervous, wearing a linen blouse that couldn't hide her sweat. She ordered iced tea, same as always, according to Torres, and sat near the window, phone in hand. Torres stood smiling like a man about to sell insurance. "Ms. Lowe, you notarized a package for my client last week. Lost part of the journal. Can you confirm which pages you used?" She blinked, caught off guard. "Oh, I'd have to check my records," he laughed easily. "Of course. But this was the one for the hospital, right? You mentioned you'd done a signing there." Her face froze just enough. "Yes, for a family authorization form." Poor man couldn't speak. I nearly dropped my cup. Torres leaned closer. "Would you mind showing me the stamp so I can verify the impression number?" She hesitated, then pulled out her notary stamp, setting it on the table. I saw it, a hairline chip near the edge, same mark that appeared on the forged POA Mason had printed for me. Torres smiled. "Perfect, thanks. That's all I needed." He pressed his napkin down on the table as he stood. When we left, I saw the faint purple ink she'd accidentally stamped into the paper fibers. "We didn't say a word until we were back in the car." "Got it," Torres said. Timestamp from the cafe register, stamp impression, and an admission she was in a hospital signing on March 8th. Enough to line her up. I exhaled, tension draining from my shoulders. "Good work." At the county office, Val met us in the hallway with a cardboard tube of certified copies, deed, POA, acknowledgement. She unrolled them on the counter, smoothing the edges. "See that?" she said, pointing to the POA. "Your A loops like a kid learning cursive. Not your usual square block. Same as the gas receipt," I said quietly. Val nodded. "I'll notarize your signature from an old file for comparison." Clean chain. We thanked her and left with the certified packet sealed and stamped. Mason called that afternoon. "We've got the bones of this case, Ray, but we'll need more muscle. Financials, escrow, and that wire." I already knew where to look. That evening, I crawled under my dock. The tide lapped against the posts like it was whispering secrets. Hidden in the crawl space was a lockbox I'd built years ago for hurricane paperwork. Inside, the Ring camera SD card waited, dusty but safe. I played the footage on my laptop. March 10th, 2:19 a.m., 2 silhouettes, a flashlight beam. One carried a banker's box labeled Deeds, Taxes. The other was tall, shoulders hunched. When the porch light flickered on, the camera caught Rafi's profile, his jawline, his old college hoodie. My blood went cold. I paused the frame. The chime from the porch's tiny bell sounded faintly, Miriam's little touch. The one she said would make thieves think twice. Guess it hadn't. By morning, Mason had the video and Val certifications. He drafted a bar complaint against the closing attorney, not to destroy him, just to make him cooperate. Then he filed a title insurance claim with the buyer's insurer. "We'll make them nervous," he said. Nervous people talk. When I checked the escrow statement, it was all there. $2,000 sale, $1,940,000 net, and a wire for $480,000 to Bayline Holdings LLC on March 13th. Torres called later, "Bayline's a shell." Rafi opened the P.O. box on March 2nd. 10 days before the deed. It was all lining up now. Every number, every late-night fob entry, every betrayal polished and labeled like evidence in a museum of greed. That night, sitting in the motel's dim yellow light, I wrote one sentence in my notebook. I was ventilated while they ventilated my life. I read it out loud. It sounded like both confession and verdict. Mason had promised the case would end publicly. I wanted it to end cleanly. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. A text from Nazia. Family dinner, April 1st. Let's be civil. I almost laughed. I replied, wouldn't miss it. When I set the phone down, I looked at Miriam's picture again. Her smile had that calm patience I used to tease her about. I whispered, it's almost time. Because now I wasn't just gathering proof. I was setting the stage. They toasted my new freedom with my old whiskey. April 1st, Nazia's dining room smelled like roasted lamb and betrayal. The chandelier hummed softly, casting long shadows on the tablecloth embroidered with golden thread. My family sat around it pretending this was dinner, not theater. The oven timer dinged just as I walked in. The sound made everyone look up, except Rafi. He was already pouring drinks, his grin polished for the occasion. My 20-year single malt, Miriam's anniversary gift, glimmered in the decanter like captured sunlight. Uncle, he said smoothly, handing me a glass. You were always working. Now you can finally relax. I turned the glass in my hand but didn't drink. That's generous, I said, my voice flat. Though I'm curious, what exactly am I relaxing from? He didn't answer, just lifted his own glass. Nazia smiled too wide, eyes darting. Let's not talk business tonight, she said. Business. That's what they called it. Selling a dying man's house was business. I set the glass down, took a folded paper from my pocket, and slid it across the table. You forgot to pay the HOA bill while you were handling things? Rafi frowned, unfolding it. 2,800? Due March 15th, I said. The day after you changed the locks. Nazia's fork paused midair. The chandelier hum seemed louder. I'm sure that's just, she began, an oversight. I leaned back. Maybe, but you'll forgive me if I don't trust the family bookkeepers anymore. Rafi's face tightened. You can't prove anything. I smiled faintly. That's the thing about proof. It doesn't need my permission. He opened his mouth again, but I cut him off with a casual tone, almost rehearsed. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. For a second, they just stared, confused. It was an old reflex, words from the home improvement podcast I'd hosted years ago. But now it worked like a blade wrapped in silk. The room's tension cracked. I stood, buttoned my jacket, and said softly, funny thing about homes, you can stage them, sell them, even strip them down to studs. But the foundation remembers who built it. I left my untouched drink on the table and walked out. Behind me, the oven timer dinged again. Outside, the Florida air smelled like rain and iron. Rafi followed me to the driveway, his voice low and venomous. You're going to ruin me. I turned toward him. The moonlight caught the edge of a banker's box in his trunk. Brown cardboard. Black marker scribbled across the top. Taxes. Rafi, I said. Calm as drywall dust. You did that yourself. He slammed the trunk shut. You're bluffing. No judge will side with you. I held up my phone and tapped the screen. In the reflection of the trunk's glossy paint, I'd already snapped a photo. The box, the label, the timestamp. His face drained color. I leaned close. You're right about one thing, I whispered. No judge likes family drama, but they do love dates, signatures, and bank trails. You left all three. He stared at me, chest rising fast. You're sick, old man. Yeah, I said, walking away. But getting better. By the time I reached the motel, Mason had already texted. Title insurer opened claim file. Buyer's counsel wants a quiet meeting. 422 hearing confirmed. Good, I replied. We'll make it loud in court instead. Torres sent another message right after, a screenshot of Rafi's Instagram story. He was standing on my dock, sunset behind him, captioned, finally free. But the metadata, the tiny timestamp in the corner, read March 11th, 9:48 p.m. The same night I was still intubated. I saved the image, forwarded it to Mason. Proof keeps breathing even when you can't. On April 3rd, the title insurer's rep called. Mr. Walker, we're reviewing your claim. This looks serious. It's more than that, I said quietly. It's arithmetic. When I hung up, I'd looked at the growing pile of evidence, each piece small, unassuming. But together they built a structure stronger than any villa, a case. That night, I wrote in my notebook, April 5th, TRO hearing. Goal, make them nervous. As I closed the notebook, thunder rolled across Sarasota Bay. I couldn't tell if it was weather or omen, but I slept soundly for the first time since waking up in that hospital bed. The next morning, Mason called. You ready for the hearing? More than ready, I said. Let's give them something to remember. He chuckled softly. You always did like your work measured to perfection. Yeah, I said. And this time the blueprint's foolproof. I hung up and looked out the window. The rain had stopped and the sky was clear again. Somewhere in the distance, a gull screeched, sharp, brief, and final. They'd stolen my house thinking I was too weak to fight back. But they forgot one thing. I build things that last, and this time, I was building their downfall. The buyer wasn't the villain. They were the fuse. April 5th, 9:06 a.m. The Sarasota County Courthouse smelled like paper and lemon wax. My palms were dry for once. I'd spent 3 weeks sweating through fear, but that morning I felt still, like a builder who's checked every measurement twice. Mason met me on the courthouse steps. You ready for the warm-up? He asked, adjusting his tie. I nodded. Let's see if our house of cards stands up in court. The temporary restraining order hearing wasn't supposed to be dramatic, just a procedural step to freeze the sale. But life has a sense of irony. The people who'd sold my house were about to meet the people who bought it. Inside, the courtroom was small, fluorescent lights buzzing faintly. The bailiff called my name, and we took our seats. Nunzia sat on the opposite bench in a navy blazer that still had the store tag tucked inside. Raffi wore the same grin he'd practiced since childhood, the one that said, I've already won. Judge Leary entered, glasses low on his nose. Let's keep this brief, he said. Plaintiff claims unauthorized conveyance of property. Defendant claims family consent. Mason stood, voice calm. Your Honor, my client was intubated from March 3rd to March 15th. The power of attorney was executed March 8th, notarized by one Kendra Lowe. We have ICU records, voice memos, and access logs showing someone entered his home while he was hospitalized. He placed each exhibit gently on the table like evidence in a museum. The ICU board photo, the HOA fob log, the gas station receipt with the forgery. The judge looked over his glasses. You're saying your client was physically incapable of signing? Mechanically ventilated, Mason said. Documented. Opposing counsel, a young man barely older than Raffi, stood. This was a family transaction. There was implied consent. My client's relatives acted in good faith to preserve assets during a medical emergency. I nearly laughed. Good faith. They'd forged my breath. Then came the twist. The buyer's attorney, an older woman with a silver streak in her hair, rose quietly. Your Honor, my clients, the Millers, are here today. 2 retirees from Ohio stood at the back, nervous, hands clasped. We were told the seller had authorized the sale, she continued. But we never met him. We were shown a POA and told the funds were to pay medical bills. We would not have purchased had we known the seller was incapacitated. That single statement changed everything. Judge Leary frowned. So the purchasers were also misled? Yes, Your Honor, the woman said. And they've already contacted their title insurer. They seek rescission. Mason glanced at me. It was the look a craftsman gives when a joint fits perfectly. Leary tapped his pen. All right. Temporary restraining order granted. No further transfer of funds or title until the evidentiary hearing, April 22nd. He looked directly at Nazia and Raffi. If these documents are fraudulent, I advise you to retain separate counsel. The state attorney's office may take an interest. The gavel struck once. The sound was clean, like a nail-driven flush. Outside, the air smelled like spring rain and hot asphalt. Raffi followed me down the courthouse steps. His voice cracked when he spoke. You're going to ruin me. I stopped. You ruined yourself the moment you picked up that pen. He stepped closer, eyes wild. You think you're some hero? Everyone dies with nothing, old man. You just sped it up. I looked at him the way I used to look at warped lumber, unfixable. No, Rafi, I just stopped letting you spend what wasn't yours. He stalked off toward the parking lot, muttering. Nazia trailed behind him, her heels uneven, eyes wet. I didn't feel triumph, just silence. Mason joined me by the courthouse doors, holding his phone. You'll like this, he said. Torres had sent over a new video. Seabird Cafe, March 8th, 6:42 p.m. Rafi and Kendra leaving together, laughing, heading toward the hospital garage. In Kendra's hand, a manila folder. Mason watched it once, then nodded. We have them on tape. If this were chess, that's check? No, I said quietly. It's just the board tilting, he smiled. You really don't want the press on this? I shook my head. No, I don't need applause. I just need my house back. We loaded the foam boards into his trunk, the quilt photo, the logs, the receipts. Each one had its place, each one an angle in the architecture of justice. As we pulled out of the courthouse lot, I saw my street through the windshield 2 blocks away. My dock light flickered once, faint but steady, like an old friend signaling across the dark. It felt like the house was waiting for me to finish what I'd started. I rested my hand on the folder of evidence and whispered, April 22nd, courtroom 3B. The final build was coming together. I built houses for a living. Today I built a case, April 22nd, 9:00 a.m. Courtroom 3B, Sarasota County. The fluorescent lights hummed low, steady as the tide. My heart didn't race. It measured, like it always did when I was about to cut the first board of a new frame. Mason stood beside me, tie perfectly straight. It's just another build, Ray, he murmured. We've got the blueprints, I smiled faintly. Then let's make it plumb. The bailiff called Walker vs. Nazia Khan and Rafi Khan et al. The gavel tapped once. Judge Leary looked over his glasses. Counsel, proceed. Mason started simple. Your Honor, my client, Raymond Walker, was intubated from March 3rd through March 15th at Sarasota Memorial. During that time, the defendants executed and recorded a power of attorney and sold his property for $2,000 without his knowledge. Consent or capacity. He placed Exhibit 1 on the easel, a blown-up photo of the ICU whiteboard. In blue marker under status, it read, intubated until 3:15, the date circled twice. Mr. Walker, the judge said, please take the stand. I rose. My knees didn't shake. I'd carried heavier things than fear. Mason began gently. Mr. Walker, where were you on March 8th, the date of the notarized power of attorney? Intubated, I said. Sedated, unable to speak, write, or move. My nurse, Elena, documented it. She also overheard my sister whisper to my nephew, sign for him? He'd want the money liquid. He nodded. And this home, what did it mean to you? He nodded. And this home, what did it mean to you? I looked at the jurist's bench, not the gallery. It was my wife's dream. I built it after she passed. Every beam has her laughter in it. It was paid off, no mortgage. It was my retirement and my grief stitched together. Mason let the silence hang. Let's talk about proof, he said finally. Exhibit 2. He revealed a large photo of the listing page. My villa on March 6th, sunlight pouring across Miriam's teal quilt. Uploaded while my client was sedated, he said. The defendants staged photos using the victim's personal items. Rafi's lawyer jumped up. Objection, emotional manipulation, overruled. The judge said, his tone gravel and ice. Mason went on. Exhibit 3, ring cam still, March 10th, 2:19 a.m. He flipped the board. 2 figures, grainy but clear, hauling a banker's box labeled deeds, taxes. Recognize that man? I nodded. My nephew, Rafi Khan. Across the room, Rafi shifted, jaw tight. Exhibit 4, Mason said. HOA, fob log, entries March 7th, 10 and 12, all while my client was hospitalized. Bob registered to the plaintiff but used by the defendants. Verified by HOA records. He let the paper trail build like framing. Post, beam, brace. Every date another nail. Then came the forged gas receipt, March 11th. Mason passed it to me. Mr. Walker, is this your signature? No, I said. That loop in the A, that's Rafi's hand. He learned to sign like that when he got his real estate license. Mason walked to the next board, a certified copy of the power of attorney. Notarized by Kendra Lowe, Miss Lowe, he called. The courtroom door opened and Kendra entered. She looked small, the kind of small that comes after too many sleepless nights. Her voice trembled. I witnessed the signing. Where? Mason asked. At the hospital. And you recall the signer? Yes. Was he speaking? She swallowed. He was quiet. Would you say he was capable of understanding you? Objection, speculative, Rafi's lawyer cut in. Mason lifted a page from the stack, Elena's sworn statement. Your Honor, Exhibit 5, medical chart documenting mechanical ventilation on March 8th, the day of notarization. The judge raised an eyebrow. So he signed while intubated. The words hung heavy in the air. Kendra stared at the floor. I didn't check the chart. You didn't check because someone paid you not to, Mason said softly. Who handed you the folder, Miss Lowe? Her eyes flicked toward Rafi. He did! A ripple moved through the courtroom. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Khan, care to comment? Rafi whispered to his attorney. Nadzia just looked at her hands. Mason wasn't done. Exhibit 6, escrow disbursement summary. $480,000 wired on March 13th to Bayline Holdings, LLC. Exhibit 7, bank registration record showing the LLC's address matches Rafi Khan's post office box. Opened March 2nd, he stacked the papers one by one. They didn't just steal a house. They built an entire business around the theft. Opposing counsel stood, sweating. This was a family misunderstanding. No, Mason interrupted. This was premeditated fraud. The judge turned to me. Mr. Walker, do you wish to add anything? I took a breath. My voice came out steady. I spent 40 years building homes for other people. When my wife died, I built one for myself. My nephew and my sister decided my coma was an opportunity. They sold my life's work while I couldn't lift a pen. But I believe in proof, not revenge. I just want what's mine returned, and the truth recorded. The courtroom fell silent. Even the air conditioner seemed to pause. Judge Leary cleared his throat. The evidence is overwhelming. The court finds the power of attorney fraudulent and void ab initio. Title is restored to Mr. Walker. The funds held in escrow are to remain frozen pending further criminal investigation. This matter is referred to the state attorney's real estate fraud unit. His gavel came down once. The sound cracked like thunder. Across the aisle, Rafi's face went grey. He turned toward Nazia. Mom, say something, but she didn't. Her lips trembled, and for the first time in my life, she looked smaller than I remembered. As we left, the Millers, the buyers, shook my hand. We're sorry, Mr. Walker, the husband said. We didn't know. I know, I said. You were honest people caught in dishonest paper. Outside, sunlight spilled across the courthouse steps. I breathed deep, the kind of breath you take when the walls finally hold. Mason clapped me on the shoulder. You did it. I pulled out my phone, dialed the same number that started it all, his. When he answered, I said, thank you. Now let's fix the rest. The gulls scattered above us, crying over the bay. Somewhere behind me, the courthouse doors closed, sealing the past in marble and record books, and for the first time in months, I felt like the ground under my feet was mine again. When the gavel fell, the internet receipts stood up. I didn't need to call the papers. The story spread by itself, first through courthouse whispers, then through the local bar association, and finally through the quiet panic of every realtor in Sarasota who'd ever cut corners on a signature. The day after the ruling, Mason called me. You're going to like this, he said. Title insurer just issued a notice. Refund expedited, claim closed in your favor. I didn't cheer. I just exhaled. It wasn't joy. It was relief, the kind that settles in your bones after you stop holding your breath for a month. 2 hours later, the clerk emailed a certified copy of the order. Title restored. Deed voided. Funds frozen. $12,400 still sitting in Bayline's account, waiting to be clawed back. The rest had been spent or buried somewhere Rafi thought was safe. But the law has a long memory. Mason filed a civil judgment for the balance, plus interest. They'll pay, he said, even if it's one paycheck at a time. That night I went home, not to a motel, not to borrowed air, but home. April 24th. The dock groaned under my boots like it was sighing with me. The smart lock beeped when I entered the new code, something only I knew. The smell inside hit me, salt, cedar, and faint lemon oil. My house, my air, the furniture they'd staged was gone. What was left looked bare but honest. In the kitchen, the same crumpled $2,800 HOA bill still sat pinned under the fridge magnet. It had waited for me like an unpaid promise. I took it down, flattened it, and drove to the HOA office the next morning. Val was at the front desk. "Mr. Walker," she said, smiling softly, "heard you made history in courtroom 3B. "Not history," I said. "Just correction." I handed her a cashier's check for $2,800 and a photocopy of the court order. "Keep that for your files," I said. "Proof that paperwork can heal what paperwork hurt," she nodded, eyes kind. "That's a first." "Yeah," I said. So was getting robbed by family. Back home, I unpacked the small things that still mattered. Miriam's quilt, her recipe book, a photo of us in front of the half-built house. I laid the quilt across the bed, smoothing each fold like it was a prayer. I recorded a short voice memo on my phone. Just me talking, the way I used to when Miriam was still alive, and I'd narrate my day while sanding the banisters. "Patience, not rage," I said quietly. "That's what builds something that lasts. You don't need to swing a hammer to break someone. You just let the truth do its work." A week passed before I saw Natsia's name flash on my phone. I didn't pick up. The voicemail came through minutes later, her voice trembling. "Ray, please. I don't know what to say." I never thought it would go that far. Rafi was desperate. "I only wanted to protect the family. Please, can we talk?" I saved it, never deleted it, but I didn't play it again either. Rafi, I heard, surrendered his temporary real estate license within days. The board listed it as pending investigation. Mason said the state attorney's office had opened a case: fraud, forged instrument, theft. I didn't need updates. Justice doesn't need applause. It just needs motion. P.I. Torres dropped off his final report in a brown envelope, neat as a blueprint. I didn't even open it. Mason already had the copies. Torres tipped his hat, said, "You ever need someone found again? I'm your man." "Hopefully," I said, "I'll never need to build another case." The following Sunday, I stood on the porch at sunset. The bay shimmered orange, the same color Miriam's hair caught in the light when she used to laugh at my clumsy jokes. I could almost hear her saying, "Told you not to let your sister near the finances." I smiled, whispered, "You were right, as always." Then I took a small frame photo of her and set it on the mantel. I didn't rebuild the villa to erase her. I'd rebuilt it to keep my promise. The wind shifted. I swear it felt like a hand brushing my shoulder. When I turned back toward the water, I finally felt it. Not revenge, not victory, but balance. Like a door quietly clicking shut after being left open too long. The next morning, a plain envelope arrived in my mailbox. No return address. Inside, a cashier's check for $12,000 and a note scrawled in messy ink. "I'm sorry. I'll pay the rest." "Rafi," I took it straight to Mason before reading it twice. "Proof of remorse," he said. "No," I answered. "A proof of consequence." I walked back out into the sunlight, breathing it in. Sarasota air has its own rhythm, hot, heavy, alive. I had my house, my name, and my breath again. And for the first time in months, I didn't need to measure anything, because everything that mattered was already level. Justice didn't feel like thunder. It felt like balance. Quiet, steady, inevitable. April 26th, 10:12 a.m. Val emailed me the final piece of paper that made it official. A scanned page, stamped in bold blue ink, title restored. Did void ab initio. Below it, her message: "You're clear, Mr. Walker. Clerk recorded it this morning. Congratulations." I sat at my kitchen counter, the same quartz surface they'd used in the listing photos, and opened the window to let the sea breeze in. The house smelled of fresh paint and old peace. For weeks I'd imagined justice as some cinematic explosion. Instead, it arrived in an email attachment and a silence that felt like forgiveness. Mason called an hour later. The state attorney filed charges, he said. Forgery, grand theft, uttering a forged instrument, and scheme to defraud. Plea negotiations are already underway. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need to. I just wanted the truth in ink. They'll probably plead out, Mason continued. Restitution and probation. Maybe some community service. That's fine, I said quietly. I'm not chasing prison time. I'm chasing closure, he paused. You got it, Ray. It's yours. That afternoon, the restitution hearing began. Small courtroom, just the judge, the lawyers, and a few curious clerks pretending not to listen. Rafi and Nadia sat on the defense side, faces pale, clothes too formal for comfort. I could see the tremor in Rafi's leg, the way he kept his hands clasped like he was holding on to something slippery. When my turn came, the judge looked at me over her glasses. Mr. Walker, would you like to make a statement? I rose slowly. My hands rested on the back of the chair for balance. Yes, Your Honor. The room went still. I'm not here to bury my family, I said. I'm here to bury the lie. They sold my home while I was unconscious, used my name like it was currency, and left me to wake up to nothing. But I'm still standing, and I believe in something stronger than payback. I believe in proof. The judge nodded. Pen paused above her notes. I don't want revenge, I added. Just restitution. Let the law finish what love failed to protect. The silence stretched long enough for me to hear the ticking clock above the door. Then the judge spoke. Restitution in full. Structured payments under court supervision. Community service to be performed at a housing clinic. A housing clinic. I almost laughed. The irony was too poetic to script. My nephew, the self-proclaimed real estate prodigy, would be handing out foreclosure pamphlets to people he once looked down on. As we adjourned, I gathered my papers, each stamped page warm in my hands. Rafi stopped me near the aisle. His voice cracked. Uncle, I didn't mean. I cut him off gently. You meant every dollar, he flinched. His mother placed a hand on his arm, but he shook it off. Do you hate me? He whispered. I looked him in the eye. No, but I'll never trust you again. That's worse. He nodded once, tears forming but not falling. For a second, I saw the boy who used to follow me on job sites, carrying my toolbox like it was treasure. Somewhere between ambition and greed, he'd lost his compass. Outside, the sunlight was blinding. I stepped onto the courthouse steps and inhaled. The air was heavy with humidity and second chances. The Millers, the retired couple who had almost bought my villa, were waiting by the parking lot. They waved. We got our refund, Mr. Miller said, smiling. And a few new grey hairs, I chuckled. At least something good came of this. His wife took my hand. You fought with dignity, Mr. Walker. That matters. Maybe, I said. But I didn't fight alone. That night, back home, I stood on the dock watching the water lap against the posts. The reflection of the moon shimmered across the bay, bright and whole. I whispered to the water, to Miriam, to the ghosts of my mistakes. It's done. Inside, I locked the new door, feeling the smooth click of the deadbolt, a sound as final as a closing argument. I laid Miriam's quilt across my lap and listened to the house breathe. For the first time since waking up in that hospital bed, I didn't hear machines or lawyers or my sister's excuses. Just the sound of home remembering who it belonged to. Justice didn't roar. It whispered. You're safe now, and I believed it. I didn't rebuild the kitchen. I rebuilt my boundaries. The court order hung framed beside the front door, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. A line drawn in ink instead of blood. It read, Title restored to owner, Raymond Walker. I looked at it every morning before leaving for coffee. It wasn't pride. It was peace. My days became quiet again. Routine was my therapy. I woke at 6:20 sharp, the same way I used to before a job site opened. Coffee percolating, gulls crying outside. Then a slow walk down to the marina, the same path Miriam and I used to take when the house was still more blueprint than home. Neighbors waved again. Some had followed the court case through local news clips. Heard you fought City Hall and won, one of them said. Not City Hall, I replied. Just family. They laughed, but I didn't. Family wounds bleed slower. Each afternoon I filed receipts into a new blue accordion folder, every section labeled by month. At the top, I taped a note to myself. When in doubt, call Mason first. Mason came by one weekend with a bottle of cheap bourbon. He set it on the counter and said, "For a man who built homes, you sure built one hell of a paper fortress." "Beats drywall," I said. He grinned. "So what's next for you?" I thought for a second. "Maybe I'll teach a workshop. Show folks how to protect their property. Tell them what a power of attorney can really cost if they're not careful." He raised his glass. "To builders who learn twice, to lawyers who listen once," I said, and we clinked. After he left, I sat on the porch and stared at the Ring camera mounted above the door. It blinked red, alive, recording, faithful. I'd almost removed it once, thinking I couldn't bear to see that footage again, but no. You don't heal by erasing the wound. You heal by proving it closed. A few days later, Elena stopped by. She'd left the hospital for a new nursing job in Tampa, but wanted to see me before she moved. She brought muffins wrapped in a napkin still warm. "I'm glad you're okay," she said. "I kept thinking about that night. What if I hadn't overheard your sister?" "You did," I said. "That's enough," she smiled, eyes glistening. "I just did what nurses do, listen." I gave her a thank you card and an envelope. She tried to refuse the check inside, but I insisted. "You kept my pulse steady when my world was unplugged," I said. She hugged me, and for a moment, the house felt full again, alive in a way that reminded me of the years when laughter still echoed off the cedar beams. After she left, I sat in the living room and read Natsia's new letter. Just one page this time. I wish I could undo it. I miss my brother. I wrote back with 3 sentences. No venom, no warmth, just truth. You didn't lose me. You gave me away when you chose paper over person. I hope one day you understand the difference. Then I folded it neatly, sealed it, and left it on the porch for the mail carrier. That night, as the sun bled into the Gulf, I walked to the edge of the dock and watched the light scatter across the ripples. The world had gone back to its rhythm, fish breaking the surface, kids laughing on distant decks, the soft hum of boat engines. It hit me then. Revenge had never been the goal. Clarity was, the house didn't need new paint or furniture. It just needed air again, honest air. When the tide rose, I whispered to the water, "It's over, Miriam. We're home." Inside, I switched off the porch light and stared one last time at the court order on the wall. It caught the glow from the lamp, shining faintly like an old carpenter's compass, simple, exact, and true. The kind of proof even time can't undo. They thought the stamp was the story. It was just the epilogue. Months later, Sarasota had gone back to being the small, sunburned town I'd always loved. Quiet marinas, retirees with fishing poles, humidity thick enough to slow even the fastest gossip. But every now and then, someone would stop me at the market and say, "You're that man from the courthouse story, right? The one who got his house back?" I'd nod, smile, and say, "Yeah, just took a little paperwork." What I didn't tell them was that paperwork had become my purpose. I started volunteering on Saturdays at a housing clinic downtown, a non-profit that helped first-time buyers understand the fine print that ruins lives. They'd hand me stacks of closing statements, and I'd circle the landmines with a red pen. "See this? That's where they hide the junk fees. And this one, power of attorney. That's the clause that almost cost me everything." The room would always go still when I said that. Not out of pity, but realization. I'd tell them, trust is a handshake. Deeds are receipts. Keep both. There was one young man, nervous, soft-spoken, who came every week. Stayed late. Took notes like he was studying for an exam on life. After class one Saturday, he waited till everyone left and said quietly, "My mentor lost his license last year. Fake POA, whole firm collapsed." He used to tell stories about a guy who caught him. I looked up, heart tightening. "What was his name?" He hesitated, then said, "Rafi Khan." For a long moment I didn't speak. I just looked at the kid, bright-eyed, maybe 25, trying to make sense of inherited mess. "What's your name, son?" "Amir," he said. "Rafi's intern. I quit when it happened, but I wanted to learn how to do it right." I nodded slowly. "Then you're already halfway there." He looked relieved, maybe expecting anger. But I wasn't angry. There's a point where fury just gets tired and turns into quiet understanding. Before he left, he said he's in a rehab program now. Teaches housing law as community service. Says you saved him from himself. I didn't reply right away. Just smiled faintly. Then maybe the foundation wasn't all bad. Sometimes you just have to strip out the rot before the structure can hold again. That evening, I drove home by the bay. The sun was sinking, throwing copper streaks across the water. The dock posts glowed like candle wicks. I sat on the steps and oiled the cedar beams, an old habit, more meditation than maintenance. The house creaked softly, familiar, grateful. Inside, I brewed tea and sat at the table, the framed court order glinting on the wall. My phone buzzed, an email from Mason. Case closed. State attorney finalized restitution. File archived. You're officially done. I read it twice, then deleted it. Some things don't need to be kept, they just need to be lived through. For the first time in a long while, I opened my old podcast microphone, the one I used back when Miriam was alive. I pressed record. My voice came out low, calm, certain. Revenge isn't rage, I said. It's restoring the line between what's yours and what's not. It's showing the world that boundaries aren't walls. They're proof you still value yourself. I paused, listening to the hum of the bay outside. To anyone listening, guard your paper, guard your peace. And if someone steals either, take them both back, quietly and completely. I ended the recording, saved the file, and uploaded it to my old show's feed. No title, just my voice in the dark. Later that night, I locked the front door, the new key turning smooth and sure. The moonlight fell across the court order on the wall, illuminating the final line, recorded and certified, April 26th. I smiled, whispering to the quiet house, "You didn't lose me, you gave me away." And I took myself back with paper, patience, and a courtroom's light. Then I turned off the lamp. The key clicked, the house exhaled, and somewhere across the water, the world felt level again. The end.